Welcome to our video on Photo 3D. This one is about the 3D filters in the program. These 3D filters are divided into 4 categories: general filters, lighting effects, camera and lens properties, and special effects. And everything is based on the depth map, which we looked at in our previous video on the basic functions in Photo 3D. That can be switched on here and saved if you want. And these 4 categories have different effects that are aimed at processing the image within its space or with spatial depth. Let's open the general effects. Let's switch off the magnifying glass here for a while for a bit more space. And these general effects include brightness, contrast, color dynamics, color temperature and sharpness. They each have one slider for the near field and one for the far field. As an example, let's reduce the brightness at the front of the image and increase the brightness at the back of the image. That gives me spatial lighting from front to back. I can do the same with the contrast. Let's reset it and increase the contrast at the front, reduce it at the back, or vice versa. Reduce it at the front, increase it at the back. Maybe turn the color up slightly at the front, turn the color down slightly at the back. Lower the color temperature at the back, make it warmer at the front. Sorry, I said cooler at the back, warmer at the front. I have to do it the other way around. And one effect that is used very often in image processing is where you start to mask the front area of the image by hand, and you then sharpen the front of the image because you want to focus the gaze at the front. If we put the focus here at the front, we can see it's sharpened for us at the front and not at the back. And these basic spatial functions allow us to make huge changes to the basic mood of the picture based on the spatial depth. We've already seen how we can combine all these things, and the same applies to all the effects in this whole module. Let's reset that for now and go to the lighting effects area. I'd like to use a new picture. Let's go to the history viewer here and load this gentleman. And this is an AI generated image which we've deliberately chosen because I want to show you that the program doesn't distinguish between images taken with the camera or images just created with AI. It works in the same way. If we look at the depth map here, we can see the generated depth information. The tailor in this image is closer to the front, his studio is in the back, and here at the side we have some mannequins for clothing, which are spatially in the middle. And what can we now do with the exposure or lighting effects? Let's use the first effect, flash, which simulates a flash. And as we see, it can sometimes be very intense. We can go right over here with the slider so far that it's a bit too exposed, overexposed. We can do so deliberately to really go beyond the limits. A sensible slider setting is always somewhere in the middle. Maybe start there and see how far you'd like to go. The simulated flash simulates not only a flash but also a shadow. Let's turn the intensity of the shadow up and we can see that the back gets darker. And the flash has a position. For instance, I can put it in front of this gentleman's head. That's where you'd normally put the light as a photographer, depending on what you wanted to highlight. And if we now choose this position for our flash here, we can use the crosshairs to set it at a specific pixel position in the image, or we can just click here and simply move the light from left to right. We can see the shadows are also calculated as we go. And that's exactly what we need to simulate a decent flash. We also need the shadow to be cast. Then we have effects. The depth light, I'll put it in the middle. Or let's make it really intense. We'll be able to see it more clearly. The depth is now in the front area. And if I set it all the way to the front, then only the front of the image, the front half of the picture, is illuminated. Let's set it right up to 100% intensity, so the front is lit up and the rear is black. Depending on where I put this depth control, let's set the depth control to the middle, and we can see how the depth light moves through the image until a silhouette is produced. The light is now only at the back. If I reduce the intensity a little, we gradually get more and more ambient light from the front. This depth light lets you create really nice effects. Maybe you just want to light a portrait from behind, especially in combination with the next two effects, where we illuminate the foreground with an extra light source, which gets a radius, a position, and a color. Maybe a reddish light, maybe a little whiter, a higher intensity, and perhaps turn it up a bit more. Now we can add a new light source to the front of our image and completely change the light throughout the picture. It works the same way for the background. We can now add a light source at the back, perhaps in the top left corner, and make it bluish. Increase the radius a bit so it's lit up a bit further forwards. If I now click the right mouse button, this is the original. This is our image with the new 3-dimensional lighting. Let's scroll up and reset. There are a few more things to see. We have a spatial vignette. You're probably familiar with vignetting from image processing. As it moves out, the image gets darker or lighter. And here you can now place a dark vignette, a darkening vignette on the picture. Not a 2-dimensional one, but a 3-dimensional. So a light sphere is integrated into the image. Let's reduce the radius. You can see how the space is reduced for the lighting. Now let's set that on the head and move the depth a little further forwards, because the head is relatively far towards or far forwards in the picture and the intensity needs to be turned down a little. Now I've spatially positioned the vignetting on the head and shoulder area of the person, and I could combine that with other lighting effects. They can all be combined with each other. The last effect down here, the light beams, I'd like to show you with another image. I've chosen this picture to do so. We've seen it before. And if I now activate the light beams here, let's say at 67%, I've just clicked it there. Let's set it to 70%, then we can see a beam of light appearing up there. Let's scroll down a bit. Now we can see the light sources in the top center, and this crosshair, as we saw earlier, lets us choose a position for this light source. I'd like to put the light up there, coming from behind the trees. And because the depth, if I move it further back, is correctly calculated over 3 dimensions, we can see how the light falls through the objects. So the cast shadow is also always created. Let's turn up the intensity a bit so we can see it better. If I now move this light to a different position, then the direction of the light beam also changes, of course. If I place it up in the top right corner, they shine through from up there, and here we can see the shadows cast by these branches. Let's go back to our old position. If I now reduce the depth of the light source, so I move it further forwards, the light becomes stronger because there are naturally fewer objects that can cast a shadow in the way. By the time we get all the way up to the front, we have the maximum light, and then we can just fade it away to the back nicely. Now we can add another color for the light beams. Maybe we want some blue in there, and we can set the strength of the light beams in our color, or maybe in the natural color for the image. If I set it all the way to 100%, the light rays are only blue or only red. If I set it to 50%, they're now 50% red and 50% in the natural light color.